What's up, guys? Lvladen here, and today I'm coming at you with a video talking about the state of Ret Paladin in Season 2 of The War Within. The first thing that I want to go over is I actually had the fortunate opportunity to create a massive feedback post from myself and a lot of the other top Ret Paladins, including the best Ret Paladin of all time, Vanguards, Europeans, multi-rank 1 Ret Paladin, Pika Pal, a couple of other rank 1 Ret Paladins, Sean and Beatman, and one of my really good Ret Paladin friends, Frumples, all the way back from Emerald Dream, met him back then, really fantastic Paladin. And we got together and talked about some of the changes that we'd like to see to Ret going forward. So the first thing that I actually want to start out with is the number one problem with Ret, and right now is that it's just straight up bugged. And wow, that's actually really cool. I've never seen this crystal change in the background. Oh my god, that's actually so cool. Anyways, one of the biggest problems right now is the bugs. And I'm going to show a couple clips going over what's happening right here. But basically, when you press your Wake of Ashes or you get a proc of your Radiant Glory, and this is, I just recently found out this is happening to Holy as well, Sun's Avatar just has a chance to not work. And if you are in Arena or BGs or Solo Shuffles or wherever, and this doesn't work for you, the Sun's Avatar, you're missing out on like 15 to 20% of your overall damage. When this spell works, it pumps, but it's just straight up not working all the time. And I couldn't tell you why this bug is occurring. I don't exactly know. I tried experimenting with a bunch of talents. I'm changing things out. It happens with regular Crusade and regular Avenging Wrath. It happens with the Radiant Glory, happens with procs, happens with Wake of Ashes. I really don't know what's going on with the ability, but for whatever reason, it just sometimes does not work. And if you are in a 2s game or 3s game or something, and this happens in your game, you are probably going to lose because you're missing out on a giant portion of your damage. Now, the other problem comes from the Templar tree. If you guys remember back to last patch, Hammer of Light was hitting very hard before the recode for whatever reason, and I really can't figure this out, and I think I have an idea of what's going on here. Hammer of Light is hitting for like 1.5, 1.6 million with a full Blessing of Dawn, Final Reckoning, Holy Flames, Crusade, Greater Judgment combo setup. Which is actually significantly less than it was hitting for last patch. And last patch we had about 7 million HP. This patch, you know, we're going into the third week of the season. People are going to have around 12 million HP. So 1.5 to 2 million hit is really low compared to what it was in season 1 when it was doing pretty much the exact same numbers. So I don't really know what's going on there. My guess is there is a problem when you target swap with Hammer of Light. So I did a bunch of skirm testing the other day, and I tunneled one target in every single one of the skirms, and I noticed that my Hammer of Light was consistently doing about 2.8 million damage on non-crit, which is a very high number. But it's also the expected number with the scaled stats that we have this season, compared to last season where it was hitting for, you know, also about 2 million. And then I queued some 3s where I was target swapping with a lot of Wake of Ashes. And this was tested over the period of a couple hours. And I noticed my Hammer of Lights went back down to about 1.5, 1.6 million. And that 1.5, 1.6 million is actually the splash damage, or what the damage from the splash effect of Hammer of Light is supposed to be doing on the AoE targets. So I don't know if there's a bug that's causing the AoE portion of the damage to be dealt single target. I can't figure it out, but that's my next guess, because I went onto the dummies and I tested all the modifiers, and at least on the PvP dummy, the modifiers are working correctly. So it's really tough to say. It's tough to say what's going on with Hammer of Light and Templar, but something is not feeling right with that hero specialization. All right, on to the big part of the video here. All right, so I'm going to link my post in the description of the video or the comments or wherever, so you guys can give me some of your feedback if you would like. But let's start out here with the problem. So Ret Paladin damage is currently too weak in PvP. The class also suffers from bugs, difficulty balancing spells, a long list of PvP modifiers, and a lack of meaningful PvP talents. though this class is definitely designed to be friendly towards beginners, some of the spells like Divine Protection, so like this is our shield wall, that can be used while stunned, is only a 10% wall in PvP, which feels pretty underwhelming. Let me further show you some evidence of Ret being a little weak in PvP right now. So here we have Vanguards, who is the best Ret Paladin of all time. He actually has the #1 spot in Solo Shuffle right now, and he actually has a negative win-loss ratio for the first time since Solo Shuffle's inception, and he's #1 overall. So what does that mean for the average Ret Paladin player if the best Ret Paladin of all time is unable to get above 50% win rate in Solo Shuffle? We can further back this evidence up with a handful of pictures I have here. So the first one being, and actually let me make sure we can all see this here. Here are the top 1,000, and I know a lot of people are gonna comment 2v2 blah 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 not balanced, but here are the top 1,000 specs for 2v2 arena. We have a lot of weak specializations in 2v2 arena for sure, but Ret Paladin is definitely on the bottom, right next to Death Knight and Enhancement Shaman and Devastation Evoker. And what do all these classes have in common at the bottom right here? There's no Mortal Strike in 2s, which, to be honest, this could really be a problem for more than just Ret Paladin. But 2v2 historically is my personal favorite bracket. I love 2v2 arena. I know there's literally no rewards in 2v2 arena, but I wish I could play it at a more even footing with the Mortal Strike classes. All right, anyways, on to the next image here. So we have the War Within top Solo Shuffle specializations right here. So we have the top 200 players. At the very bottom here, we have Retribution, right next to Unholy Death Knight and Balanced Druid and Restoration Druid and Mistweaver Monk, some of the worst specializations in the game right here. Retribution down at the bottom, even in Solo Shuffle, which historically Ret Paladin is one of the best Solo Shuffle specializations. And quite honestly, it's just because the damage is really, really low. Okay, over onto the next image here, we have the top, roughly top 500 3v3 specializations. Towards the bottom part of the ladder here, we have Retribution Paladin, right next to some of the other worst specs in the game right here. Elemental Shaman, definitely not super fantastic. I actually don't think Ellie's as bad as people say. I'm sure a lot of people say that about Ret Paladin as well. But as you can see, it's definitely near the bottom performing specializations in the top of the threes ladder right here. And interestingly enough, we see we see Outlaw Rogue down here, but I also just think Outlaw Rogue is a very underplayed specialization overall. And then lastly here, we have, oops, I can't even drag this image over here. We have in the top 100 of 3v3 specializations, there's not a single Retribution Paladin here. There's not a single Ret Paladin in the top 100 of the 3v3 specs here. And this is kind of a loaded stat though, because this is the very beginning of the season, so this data is pretty small overall. But it's just something to consider here. All right, so let's go back to the post right here, and let's look at some of the proposed solutions that we have. So I'm thinking things that could likely be hotfixed and tuned that wouldn't really break Ret overall and make it super OP, but also would pick it up from kind of the bottom part of the pack overall. And let me show you real quick an image I have here. Where is it? So this is one of my Solo Shuffles. I'm a Ret Paladin down here. This is a Destro Warlock, and then we have a Fury Warrior, and I believe this was a BM Hunter. Yep, this is a BM Hunter here. My damage, and I had full uptime this entire game, was significantly less than the Fury Warrior and the BM Hunter and it was less than the Lock, who was getting trained all game, and I did less healing than the Lock that was getting trained all game. And by the way, Ret healing is really just, it comes from Lay on Hands and Lightbearer, and Lightbearer is really amplifying your healer's healing, which I'm actually not a fan of that talent either. All right, so let's go back to the proposed short-term solutions. I think the best thing that they can do immediately is fix the Sun's Avatar bug. Fix the Sun's Avatar bug, see how things are. Fix the Hammer of Light bug, see how things are. If that is not enough, and I expect it probably is not enough, at least remove the PvP modifier from Avenging Wrath and Crusade. Maybe don't remove it from Radiant Glory, but remove it from Avenging Wrath and Crusade, like for certain. Avenging Wrath being a 10% damage buff makes it unusable in PvP. I did not notice when Final Verdict was buffed by 10%. I will not notice when I pop Avenging Wrath and my damage is buffed by 10%. The same goes with Crusade. So Avenging Wrath has a 50% PvP modifier on it. Crusade has, I believe, about a 2/3 PvP modifier on it. That means that at 10 stacks, you get 23% overall damage increase. I think it's time to unnerf these at minimum. I would love if we saw significant buffs to Final Verdict to improve our damage overall. But if Blizzard looks, it looks like they want to go slow in terms of the buffs, my number one ask, and our number one ask overall in this feedback form, aside from a Mortal Strike effect, is actually just unnerfing wings. I would even be happy if they unnerfed Avenging Wrath from 10% to 15% just to see what would happen. It's one of my favorite abilities of all times, and it just does nothing right now. I feel like Ret damage is factored over the high uptime that you have with Radiant Glory wings, and I don't like it. It makes all of our abilities feel like that they do nothing when we don't have our wings up, and it makes our wings kind of feel like our baseline damage overall. Some of the medium-term fixes that we want to see here, we definitely want to see a rework of the Ret Paladin PvP talents overall. Of our talents right now, I would love to see a lot of them go. I'm not a fan of Luminescence because that's someone else doing the healing. It's not me doing the healing. I mean, technically it radiates off me as a player, but Luminescence transferring healing it feels very passive and boring. Ultimate Retribution cannot realistically be used in PvP. You would only really use Ultimate Retribution if you were in a huge world PvP battle. In these situations, they just don't really happen anymore. Spreading the word. So when you Bless of Freedom and it clears all movement and pairing effects, this is a redundant effect because we already have Unbound Freedom to Freedom and Ally. And then the extra portion of Spreading the Word, the physical damage reduction for 6 seconds on a 5-minute cooldown, is very, very, very niche overall. Like when you Blessing of Protection someone, it's usually because they're the one taking the damage and then maybe you get swapped on. But more than likely, there could be a purge for the Blessing of Protection. There could be a MD. It's not a talent that I would really ever take. There are other talents that we already currently have that are better than this one. And the only way that I would take this is that if some of our other mid talents were already removed. Now we have Blessing of Spell Warding, which is really good, but it's also super situational. We have Searing Glare, which definitely has some skill behind it. I don't think Searing Glare is a terrible talent overall, although I'm not personally a huge fan of Searing Glare. It is kind of fun to, land those double Searing Glares on the melee cleaves. It's not as powerful when fighting melee caster comps because they're not always stacked all the time. But it definitely is good against other cleaves. And then we have Spellbreaker, which I'm personally not a fan of eye for an eye at all, attaching offensive mechanisms to defensive talents. There's a reason that people really hated when Shield of Vengeance broke on them in Legion for 1 billion damage. Shining Revelation, revealing stealth from rogues and feral druids, except it's tied to bubble. Not ever really feasible in PvP. Hallowed Ground is not a terrible talent into certain comps, but into those few comps, it's also kind of really good against, like Frost DK, Devastation Evoker. I would honestly be okay if Hallowed Ground was tossed out the window as well, because there are certain times when, sure, Hallowed Ground could be good, but when you have Hallowed Ground and you want to use it, you can't, because it's no longer an active ability. It's tied to a internal cooldown on your Blade of Justice. So a lot of our PvP talents are really poorly designed. And then we have Blessing of Sanctuary, which is probably one of the main reasons that Ret is considered the support class and kept low on the damage meters and whatnot. And I'll get back to talking about Blessing of Sanctuary in a little bit. But let's focus on the list of talents that we want to see here for the upcoming patches in the future. I would love to see if Ret could get a Mortal Strike. Now, I don't think that it should be as powerful as some of the other classes' Mortal Strikes. Maybe something like a 15 to 20%, similar to what they did with Demo Lock when they first gave them a Mortal Strike back. But I would love to play twos, and I don't think a 15% Mortal Strike would be a deal breaker for 2v2. It would also open up compositions in threes, like playing Ret Ellie or Ret Boomy or, Ret Mage maybe even. And I think a lot of people are against this. But honestly, why not? If we can play Windwalker Boomy, why can't we try and play Ret Boomy or something? Like, oh god, lay on hands. Wait, hold up. We have a whole section devoted to trade-offs in the long-term suggestions here. But I would love, as a Ret, to play with some of the classes that I've historically never played with. For example, I've pretty much just played Ret Warrior for the past two and a half expansions, and before that I pretty much just played Ret Hunter since Mist of Pandaria. Like, that was it. There's a handful of times, like I believe in Warlords of Draenor and Cataclysm, where Ret DK was okay, but that was pretty much it. All right, so let's talk about the wish list here. So I think another cool talent could be Undispellable Hodge. And before people freak out, what if we made it like a 4-second duration, right? So like give it a second off and make it undispellable. That could be kind of cool. If not, whatever. Steed of Glory. Put a knock on our horse. That'd be kind of cool, right? Or just make Steed of Glory the prot spell verbatim. Emancipation. So adding a magic root and slow cleanse to the current cleanse ability. So we did have this for a time after the Ret rework in Judge of the Peer. Actually, we had Judge of the Peer before the Ret rework, I believe, but then it became AoE. And it was kind of nuts. But what if, and actually now that I'm reading this, what if instead of like an 8-second CD, maybe if 8 seconds was too much, maybe we put it on like a 20-second CD or something? I don't know. It was cool. Ret always had in the past a way to cleanse the slows off people as well, and then they removed it in the Legion Ret rework. And this has been a hot button topic for Rets over the years, is getting Emancipation back in some way or form. That would be cool. Having a 50% slow would be cool as well. We used to have a 70% slow, but then they just got rid of it and gave us a 30% slow. So having a slow back would be pretty nice. Cataclysm Word of Glory. So here I'm going to talk a little bit. I'm going to skip a little bit ahead and talk about Lay on Hands. So for the longest time, Lay on Hands was actually not usable in rated PvP because it was considered busted. And then they allowed us to use Lay on Hands in PvP. But then dampening and Mortal Strike and the 25% reduction that were added onto Lay on Hands actually made it pretty ineffective for its entire duration until recently, when when did this come out? Last patch, 2 patches ago, the talent Imperial Ward came out and made it ignore Mortal Strike and healing reduction effects. So all of a sudden, Ret became a really strong class in Solo Shuffle because dampening kicked in really fast in Solo Shuffle on top of the Mortal Strike effects. I would trade away Lay on Hands to get some form of healing back into Word of Glory and back into Flash Heal. Maybe by attaching some sort of cooldown to Word of Glory, or maybe a trade-off, like you could no longer use Lay on Hands as this PvP talent, but now your Word of Glory is increased by 300%, and it has a 25-second cooldown, something like that. I don't know. And when I say 300%, guys, Word of Glory is only healing for like 400k right now, and we have what, like 12 million HP. It's really undertuned. And Healing Hands no longer functions on allies. So when you see like a 800k Word of Glory, it's really when the Ret Paladin casts it on himself, pre-dampening. Vengeful Strike. So another talent that could be interesting. Reduce the range of Final Verdict and Justicar's Vengeance by 40%, which actually would return them to their pre-rework range, the 12 yard and the melee range for JV, and increase the damage by 40%. Now, it doesn't have to be 40%. It could be more, it could be less, it could be tuned around however much damage Final Verdict is actually doing at the time. But bringing Ret back to a little bit, or having the option for some Rets to go back to like a more melee-oriented play style could be interesting. All right, so now let's talk about the long-term effects of Ret and beyond here. All right, so the long-term changes that I would love to see here would be, and this would be actually specifically to make Blizzard's life easier, finding some way to remove the need for all of the PvP modifiers. Like, Ret was designed around this bursty, one-shotty spec in PvE, but then it just wasn't allowed to be that in PvP. And this could be down to, like, you know, this could come down to just the current tuning effects, but I feel like it must be so difficult for Blizzard to tune Ret Paladin when every one of the spells needs some sort of PvP modifier. And I actually think I left some of it out of the list right here. Just off the top of my head looking at it, like Inquisitor's Ire also has a PvP modifier that I forgot and I left out on this list, but it really would be cool if some of the spells kind of functioned or were balanced with PvP in mind and not forgotten for multiple expansions. Like all the healing spells outside of a few, like Adjust Reward and Lightforge Blessing and the recently nerfed Seal Crusader, all have PvP modifiers on them. They're pretty insignificant overall. So yeah, just again, balancing Ret is difficult because of the sheer number of modifiers. Can lead to toxic one-shot scenarios. I think a lot of people have some PTSD over Ret after the 10.0.7 rework. But at the same time, because of all these modifiers, our key abilities like Final Verdict and Holy Power Generators feel really underwhelming outside of our burst goes. And that's historically. Right now, even during our burst goes, they feel pretty insignificant. But historically, when Ret has been a little bit more balanced, like last patch, our generators still, in Final Verdict itself, still felt really bad to press. All right, so things that we came up with suggestions for the long-term fixing of Ret as a whole would be making Lay on Hands no longer actually usable in PvP and returning some of Ret's healing to Word of Glory and Flash Heal. That makes it so we have a more active playstyle while also not pissing off other people when you're 3 minutes into a solo shuffle round and the Paladin goes and lays on hands someone at full HP and the game's over. The next would be increasing the cooldown of Sanctuary by 15 seconds. I feel like this is a pretty hot topic for everyone. Everyone hates Sanctuary, but like it's the only thing that's making Ret decent right now, I swear. Increasing the cooldown of Blessing of Sacrifice by 30 seconds. That would make it so it's about 1.5 minutes in PvP, which would not line up with as many classes goes. Same with the Sanctuary right here. And then removing the ability to use Divine Protection during stuns in exchange for its PvP unnerf. So right now, Divine Protection is only a 10% wall. That's essentially nothing. So we would, I'd take the 20% wall, so actually having Divine Purpose do something in exchange to not have it used during stuns. So like you have to pre-wall go. You have to use your brain a little bit more. And then in return, we would absolutely love a Mortal Strike talent or some form of Mortal Strike. Removal of the PvP modifiers on Avenging Wrath and Crusade, which actually I think should just come off right now. And then significantly higher damage overall. And I think this was a pretty hot topic for some people on Twitter and whatnot. But right now, guys, Ret is doing like 60% of the average melee damage dealer's damage. I swear, it's so bad. And currently our utility is not like, you can't justify that type of damage in modern WoW. Damage is kind of what rules the games for the most part. You know, damage and positioning. And then spells that deliver meaningful single target damage instead of weak AoE effects like Blessed Champion. Although we understand the need for these in AoE talents, I think it'd be nice if PvP was kept in mind when Jesus, I've been talking for a long time. It'd be nice when things are kept in mind for Ret and PvP. So like Blessed Champion contributes no meaningful damage to Ret overall. It does not do too much, but we take it because, you know, we can kind of cleave sometimes. All right, and then here's the last point here. So Ret is a DPS class and should be focused on delivering strong, impactful single target damage, not prolonging games as a tank/support. If we wanted tank/support specializations, I feel like we would play Prop Paladin or Augmentation Evoker. And in PvP, Augmentation Evoker and Prop Paladin, when they're good, are incredibly unpopular. People hate fighting those specializations. And that's because they prolong games forever and make people feel unkillable. And I don't want Ret to be transitioning into that type of role. And that's kind of it, guys. I think that's about it. We have a ton of upvotes on this post here. It's really nice to see. We also have a ton of haters on Twitter, which is also pretty funny. Happens all the time. But I don't think, if I had a chance to talk with them, like one-on-one or kind of vocalize things outside of text, I feel like I could convince them into my points here a little bit better than over the chat, obviously, because I believe face-to-face or at least voice communication is always a better communicating method than typing. All right, I believe that is it for this video. I've kind of rambled long enough. I hope you all enjoyed this video. Feel free to give a thumbs up, like, subscribe, follow me on Twitch, Twitter. Make sure you go upvote the post, leave the comments below, and I will see you all next time. Peace.